This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Welcome to our show. President Bush has lifted an almost two-decade-old executive order banning offshore and natural gas drilling. With prices at the pump over $4 a gallon, Bush has been pushing to allow more drilling in the Outer Continental Shelf and the Arctic Wildlife National Refuge amid strong opposition from environmentalists. The executive drilling ban was issued by President George H.W. Bush in 1990. His son's lifting of the ban yesterday is largely symbolic because a separate congressional ban has prohibited offshore drilling since 1981. Speaking on the White House lawn Monday, the president urged lawmakers to lift the ban.
Failure to act is unacceptable. It's unacceptable to me, and it's unacceptable to the American people. So today I've issued a memorandum to lift the executive prohibition on oil exploration in the OCS. With this action, the executive branch's restrictions on this exploration have been cleared away. This means that the only thing standing between the American people and these vast oil resources is action from the U.S. Congress. Now the ball is squarely in Congress's court.
In President Bush's final months of office, the economy is at the top of the agenda. Oil prices now exceed $140 a barrel, more than double $70 a year ago. The high cost of oil has helped exacerbate the global food crisis that threatens to push over 100 million people below the poverty line due to rising food prices. This all comes amidst an ongoing housing crisis, with the U.S. Treasury and Federal Reserve unveiling sweeping steps to possibly bail out the nation's two largest mortgage lenders, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Amidst these multiple crises, how best to understand government policies being enacted? Naomi Klein is the author of The Shock Doctrine, The Rise of Disaster Capitalism. The book is out in paperback this month. It was first published in September. And in some ways, much of what Naomi writes about in the book is more relevant today. Naomi Klein joins us in our Firehouse studio for the hour. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you, Amy.
Food, fuel, housing, climate change. Talk about these crises. First, start with oil.
Yeah, there really is a kind of a tsunami of shocks facing not just the economy, but people's lives, people's real lives. They're all intersecting. They're making each other worse. And I think we really are seeing some very live examples of what I write about in the book, which is how there is a strategy, and this is what I mean by the shock doctrine. There is a clear political strategy, and has been for several decades, to exploit these moments when people are desperate for quick fix solutions, and more inclined to believe in a kind of a magical cure, to push through very, very unpopular policies that don't actually solve the crisis at hand, that don't actually help people, but are incredibly profitable for multinational corporations. And I think we are seeing a very vivid example of this with this speech from George Bush yesterday, where he is taking a very real crisis, which is demanding complex and profound changes in the way we live and the way we organize our economy, but particularly in the need to diversify our energy sources. And I think there's a tremendous actual amount of support for this idea from the public. And he comes in, and I call him in my recent column the extortionist in chief. Basically what he's saying is he's holding the country ransom. He's not taking any of these long-term policy routes to dealing with climate change, to dealing with high oil prices. It's just let us drill, or nobody can go on summer vacation. And he's selling a myth, which is that by allowing drilling, the price at the pump is going to go down, which is really interesting because just yesterday, in response to Bush's announcement, oil went up. And oil futures went up. And so the price of oil is going to keep going up.
How long would it take the oil drilled offshore, if he succeeds in getting his father's ban reversed, to get into the supply?
Well, first of all, I think it's really important for people to understand that we are being subjected to an incredibly aggressive media campaign sponsored by the oil and gas industry. And it's to the point where it really is impossible to tell the difference between the paid advertisements, which we're being bombarded with on cable news from from the oil and gas industry, talking about how they can solve the problem of high prices with more drilling, and all of these commentators from Larry Kudlow to Sean Hannity repeating these talking points, and not to mention Dick Cheney, who just propagated a complete lie, saying that China was drilling off the coast of Cuba, and the Vice President's office actually had to retract that. It turns out his source was George Will, who also had to issue a correction. China is not drilling off of Cuba, and so there's a very aggressive campaign going on. The reality is it would take between 5 to 10 years to see any of that oil. Everybody admits this. Everyone knows this. You have to do the exploration, then you have to build the rig, which takes a huge amount of time. So it takes we're talking about as long as a decade to see any of this oil. So when you press people who are selling this drill in Anwar, more offshore oil drilling, also drilling into the shale in places like Montana, what they actually say is that the reason why it will lower prices at the pump, soon, this summer, is because it will send a message to the stock market. It will send a message to the oil speculators that more supply is on the way. So essentially what they're saying is, let's play the market. Let's collectively play the market. And that's why it's significant that yesterday, in the face of Bush's announcement, and it was a significant announcement because it was a real indication of the seriousness of this administration to really make this their final push in office. And they could well win, because this media campaign is really bringing public opinion on side, and we know that the Democrats are